I want to start with a broad question, and that is, as we approach the second week of this war, how clear to you are the strategic objectives for Israel in this conflict?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me this early morning. Thank God I got the clock straight before I got
you and me both.
This was a big concern for everyone, Ambassador. We're very proud of you.
Yeah. Let me listen. You know, one thing I've learned in my career here is foreign policy is very complicated. A lot of things can be true at the same time. There's no question that all of us understand that Iran is a wicked regime. What they have done in the last, multiple decades, but certainly it's proven by what's happened here in the last couple of weeks. Not only have they killed, thousands and thousands of their own people who were protesting, but then they decided, which they've always done, is turn the guns on Israel, which we have known for and done, seen and witnessed for a long period of time. But through their proxies between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, they made a strategic decision to attack some of their allies in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE. That totally changed the dynamics here. So one for sure is that this is very complicated, and certainly from my perspective, I'll have no tears lost for the supreme leader. The other issue, I think, is obviously what you've been talking about on the air a lot, is what the end game is. Mm-hmm. And I think, when the prime minister and the president talk about regime change, I've been around this for a long time and was involved in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya. Last time I checked, there isn't Jeffersonian democracies in those countries. So this is really complicated, guys, and we're going to have to all watch this play out in the next couple weeks.
I want to ask you about that relationship between the prime minister and the president, and how much influence Benjamin Netanyahu has over President Trump. We've got a statement from the Iranian foreign minister saying that Netanyahu was duped into conflict. He says they, meaning the American people, have ended up with an administration that Netanyahu, after decades of failed attempts, finally managed to dupe into fighting Israel's war. What's your take on that, and how influential do you think Israel was in convincing Washington to make this decision?
Well, first of all, I don't think I'm going to be suggesting that the Iranian spokesperson actually knows what he's talking about. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, no one, regardless if you love Israel or don't, to believe that what Iran has been doing to Israel through its proxies. Look what they did with Hamas. Look what they did with Hezbollah. Look what they did to their own people. So the idea that somehow people have been duped into realizing that Iran is a bad actor is ridiculous. I think that, when I worked for President Biden, we supported Israel when the Iranians attacked Israel for the first time. I supported them in defense, but also offensively as well. So I don't think anyone's necessarily pushing Donald Trump around. I think that's somewhat absurd. I do think it is important to step back and to understand two things. One is we have to understand what the objectives of this is. How do we determine what success is? I'm not sure success is necessarily, quote, regime change, but one will have to debate that. And I do believe Congress has a role here, guys. I think it's important for us to understand that. And I think that will be debated for a long period of time, of the role of Congress as it relates to this particular war.
You bring up Hezbollah, and I want to ask you about Lebanon, because we've seen Israel's attacks now kind of venture into Lebanon more and more. And I'm going to play a little bit of sound here from Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, on what they're doing there in Lebanon. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
And the government of Lebanon will pay a heavy price. If Nasrallah destroyed Lebanon, then Naim Qassem will also ruin it in this way.
Again, Ambassador, we see this kind of renewed focus on Lebanon and Israel claiming there's no sort of territorial claim to Lebanon. What do you make of the way that this war is moving again into that country, not just in Iran, but into Lebanon as well?
I don't know if you've been to Israel, and I'm sure some of you guys certainly viewers who are watching this, Lebanon shares a border with Israel, as you know, and it's right in the northern border. It's a huge risk, and certainly Hezbollah has shown to be a terrible actor. Again, a proxy of the Iranians. And I think, we've seen, it's 8 months ago, a lot of intense fighting to diminish Hezbollah. You have a leader now in Lebanon who the president of the United States has met with. I think ultimately this is going to continue to be a huge area of friction. Israel believes that Hezbollah has not been destroyed. It certainly hasn't been dismantled. They've been weakened. And certainly the state sponsor of their terrorism, which is Iran, has been weakened. But but it's a huge threat to Israel. And so, listen, I for one, have been a big advocate of obviously strengthening the president of Lebanon to attempt to try to make these sectarian things come together. But it's hugely problematic for the Israelis, and certainly those Israelis who are living in the northern part of the country.
I want to shift a little bit and ask you, because you were an ambassador, because you were in the State Department, your perspective on the consular part of this. There has been a lot of criticism that the U.S. did not properly warn Americans in the region, its allies in the region, and did not have a plan, even if you needed to keep that as a close hold, not to telegraph the attacks. There didn't seem to be a fast rollout plan to evacuate Americans out of the region. You know, we had that one authorized departure for Tel Aviv, but I didn't see them for other places. And other places around the region, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, have all been hit really hard. We've got Americans who are trying to get out. The State Department now has organized charters. But what is your response to that initial response from the State Department, and whether they should have done more or better to get folks out faster?
Listen, I can't sit around and second guess. I was the Deputy Secretary of State, and I was Ambassador to Israel. I don't think that there's people at the State Department that are reluctantly trying to communicate with people. I think, listen, it's complicated. You're in a military operation, it happens quickly. As you know, the rules are very quick. If once the State Department says to the embassy staff that they should depart, they then have to make sure that any American who wants to leave. So it can't be a double standard.
And that notice has to be public for that reason.
Yeah. So I think, listen, the people will step back. I think again, I'm not here to be, trying to be overly critical, because it's really, really complicated. The men and women who work at the State Department, the career people, want to do the right thing. They tried it. Getting charters in is not simple to do, especially when the airspace is complicated. So I think everyone needs to, again, believe me, I have been stuck there when the rockets, it's really scary. I mean, the Emirates and the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the Qataris are seeing something that they've probably, in most of these people's lives, have never witnessed. Listen, sadly, I'm talking to my friends every day who are sitting in bunkers 4, 5, 8, 10 times a day in Israel. I don't think it's because they're used to it. They like it. So I think the region is getting a little bit of feeling what sadly what Israel has been through for a long, long time, and they don't like it. And obviously, hopefully those Americans are getting out, because it is scary sitting in a house. I don't think people understand how frightening it is, and especially in places in non-Israel where they don't have bomb shelters, where drones are flying over your head. It really, having been there, it's not pleasant, and you do not get used to it.
I want to draw more on your experience in the State Department. So beyond you just being the ambassador to Israel, but the role that you've played there, as you look at the level of diplomatic engagement with other countries as all of this unfolds. So it does seem like this is very much a mission of the U.S. and Israel at this point in time. And we saw yesterday kind of back and forth between Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, and President Trump. President Trump suggesting that the UK shouldn't join wars after we've already won them. We saw kind of muted statements from European officials here. What should be
Spain?
Yes. Yeah. What should be happening on the diplomatic track at this point in time as the military conflict continues? What do you think the U.S. should be doing, Israel should be doing to sort of get more allies onto its side as this war continues?
As I said at the beginning, foreign policy is quite messy. It's just not, it does not follow a straight line, because things happen and unintentional. A couple of things that are interesting if you step back and look at this. First of all, I think the Iranians' decision to attack Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, Kuwait and Qatar, was a massive mistake, because, as I say, your enemy of your enemy is your friend. And they certainly have galvanized the rest of the Middle East as it relates to how bad actors the Iranians are. That's number one. Number two, the president's going to need allies, and not only just the Middle East, he's going to need European allies, because if this drags out, obviously there's going to be all sorts of needs for both airspace and supplies and importance of that. And I like to remind people, the European countries are fighting a war against Putin and what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, we've sort of, you guys aren't talking about what's going on in Ukraine. This Ukraine thing is just, sadly just went to its fourth year. So you have a lot of things going on right now. And, you need, when I was, working at the State Department, you need friends. You need friends in good times, and you certainly need friends in bad times. And so we're going to see ourselves, I'm sure that Secretary Rubio and the Trump guys are reaching out to these allies all the time and trying to get their help. But your point is 100% correct. You need allies in times of peace, and you definitely need allies in times of war.